Very good morning to all the students of class plus 1B. Yes, beta, we are going to continue chapter Mother's Day. We have been doing this since 3 days, I guess. Fine. So it's the fourth day. Again, I need to tell you there are some one or two students who have not joined in between. So please be regular. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand this play Mother's Day. Okay. So Pearson family, you can see Mrs. Pearson or Mrs. Anne Pearson is her full name. She is the protagonist of this chapter. George Pearson, husband of Mrs. Pearson. Doris Pearson is daughter of Mrs. Pearson. Cyril Pearson is son of Mrs. Pearson. Then we have Mrs. Fitzgerald. She is neighbor or you can say friend of Mrs. Pearson. Clear? So these are the 5 characters in the whole play. And the basic storyline is about importance of mothers in the family. Fine. We take mothers for granted. We never say thank you to them for their household work, for the daily chores they are doing for us. We are so ungrateful towards them, and not only ungrateful, sometimes you can say misbehave with them. We are, we are disrespectful towards them. We don't talk nicely to them. At least they're working 24/7 for us, whether they're working mothers or house makers. In both the cases, we need to respect them. Those who have given you birth, and then they are raising you with so many efforts, and we are so ungrateful towards them. So this lesson is an eye opener for all of us, that how we should respect our mothers. Okay. So in this storyline, Mrs. Pearson is very submissive, down to earth character who does not speak anything, and she's accepting whatever situation is there in her family. Mrs. Fitzgerald, neighbor plus friend of Mrs. Pearson, she is opposite to her character. She's very bold and confident lady. She's a fortune teller. She reads the tarot cards also. And then Mrs. Fitzgerald, advises Mrs. Pearson that she should take a stand for herself, that she should speak against these 3 members of her family, husband, daughter, and son, who are so self-obsessed. These are so self-obsessed that they go to work, and when they come back to work, after that, they keep on giving orders to Mrs. Pearson to prepare tea, to get their things ready. And after that, they visit the house, and then they again leave for their enjoyment at the parties or visiting with their friends and all. But they never ask the mother out. They never ask that whether she wants to go. Even at the club, when Mr. George Pearson goes to club every day, and he never asks his wife. Fine. So then Mrs. Fitzgerald advises, and Mrs. Pearson does not accept it. Then at the end of the day, Mrs. Fitzgerald, enchants the mantra and holds the hand of Mrs. Pearson. Then the exchange of personality occurs. Fine. Then after the exchange of personality, Mrs. Pearson becomes so, or you can say bold, confident, and she also starts showing her confidence in her talks, and she starts insulting one by one. Doris will be coming first, and she would ask for her yellow dress ironed or not, or tea ready or not. Then she will be rebuking, and she will be you can say she was so sarcastic towards her. She will be literally insulting her daughter. Then then Cyril Pearson comes back home. Then he also asks for his things ready or not, and tea or anything to eat. Then again, she also answers back to him that he can prepare on his own. Then George Pearson comes home. He also thought, he tells that he does not want to have tea because he's going to have a very sumptuous dinner at his club. And then Mrs. Pearson says, okay, even then I have not prepared, whether you want to take it or not. And then argument starts between the two, and all of the family members have realized that something is there, that Mrs. Pearson is now totally different. She does not behave the way she used to do it earlier. And all 3 of them are shocked that how come she has changed overnight. And they just went at the work, and when they came back, she's altogether different. Fine. So that is the point of concern. Now we are going to continue with her. So we were on page when she insults Mr. George Pearson, that everybody calls him Mr. Ompy Ompy. Fine. Pompy Ompy at the club. And she was drinking stout and smacking her lips. And Mrs. Fitzgerald again comes over there. Fine. Mrs. Fitzgerald she has become submissive, anxious, underconfident, and opposite of Mrs. Fitzgerald is Mrs. Pearson now. Clear? Dobara वापस आई है Mrs. Fitzgerald, moving to the left center anxiously. I just wondered if everything is all right. No, it's not. Of course it is. You be quiet indignantly and loudly. Why should I be quiet? Mrs. Pearson, because I tell you to, you silly, spoilt young person, and protesting nervously, oh no, surely. Now, Mrs. Fitzgerald, just let me manage my family in my own way, please. See, Mrs. Pearson was, scolding Cyril. She has never done this earlier. Cyril, again, Cyril was, you can say, misbehaving Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mr. Cyril Pearson, to you, please, Mrs. Fitzgerald. So Cyril again goes back to the kitchen. So she intervenes and he goes back to the kitchen. Moving to the settee, whispering, oh dear, what's happening? Nothing much, just putting them in their places, that's all. Doing what you ought to have done long since. Is George home? She sits beside Mrs. Pearson on the settee. Yes, I have been telling him what they think of him at the club. Well, they think a lot of him, don't they? No, they don't. And now he knows it. Oh dear, I wish you had not, Mrs. Fitzgerald. See, because this is the exchange of personality, that's why dono ka opposite beta. Please try to understand, okay? Because Mrs. Fitzgerald is now going to speak like Mrs. Pearson, earlier Mrs. Pearson. So she is scared, ki aise kyun bola, you should not have done this, And Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying, Mrs. Pearson, nonsense, doing them all a world of good, and they all be eating out of your hand soon, you will see. I don't think I want them eating out of my hand. Well, whatever you want, they will be doing it, all three of them. Mark my words, Mrs. Pearson. Fine. So Mrs. Pearson is addressing Mrs. Fitzgerald by calling her Mrs. Pearson because she knows that this is my personality she is having, and she also knows that this is my personality. तो वो अपने आप को अपने अपने नेम से ही एड्रेस कर रही है. Clear? Because for the family they are same bodily but personalities are exchanged. But in heart of hearts, दोनों ladies को तो पता है ना that they are the who's what is the reality. So they are addressing them with their real names. George enters left glumly. He is unpleasantly surprised when he sees the visitor. He moves to the armchair, sits down heavily, glumly lights his pipe. Then he looks from Mrs. Pearson to Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is regarding him anxiously. So he is anxious because already he had an argument with his wife about being pompy and being rebuked at the club, being ashamed of what people call him names and all. So then he looks at Mrs. Fitzgerald कि कितने गलत टाइम पे उसके घर पे आ गई हैं. Just looked in for a minute, I suppose, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Who does not know what she's saying? Well, yes, I suppose so, George. George, aghast. George, oh, I'm sorry. What does it matter? Your name is George, isn't it? Who do you think you are, Duke of Edinburgh? जब मिसेस फिट्जरॉल्ड उसको जॉर्ज नाम से बुलाती हैं, जॉर्ज कहता है कि मेरा नाम लिया तूने, मींस जॉर्ज. He was so shocked. He was having high airs about himself. So Mrs. Fitzgerald says, I'm sorry. Because Mrs. Fitzgerald is nervous now. She feels so sorry. और Mrs. Pearson आगे से कहती है, what does it matter? तुम्हारा name George है तो तुझे George ही बुलाएगी ना. She's not going to call you Duke. Duke means king of Edinburgh. तो कोई राजा है कहीं का. She will call you George only. His wife is insulting him in front of now. According to him, she's neighbor. Fine. उसको नहीं पता कि मेरी wife है वो. After exchanging personalities. What's he got to do with it? Just tell me that. And isn't it bad enough without her calling me George? No tea. Pompey Pearson. Poor Doris has been crying her eyes out upstairs. Yes, crying her eyes out. So now George is giving a list of things which she's doing. He's saying that, कि तुम्हें हुआ क्या है? What you're doing? Tell me clearly. That firstly, isn't it bad enough that she's calling me George? You have not prepared tea for me. You're calling me Pompey Pearson, and then my daughter Doris is crying her eyes out. What's the matter with you? So he's worried now कि इसकी wife को क्या हो गया? Why she's like this? Mrs. Fitzgerald, she starts crying. Wailing means crying. Why she's crying? Because वो submissive हो चुकी है. Oh dear, I ought to have known. Mrs. Fitzgerald कहती मुझे पता होना चाहिए था. George says, staring at her annoyed, you ought to have known. Why ought you have to know? Nothing to do with you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Look, we are at 6s and 7s here just now, so perhaps we will excuse us. We are at 6s and 7s means we are already having arguments now. We are not at all in right condition. We are fighting with each other. And you are entering at that point in our family. I guess you should excuse us. You should leave us. Mrs. Pearson, before Mrs. Fitzgerald could speak, Mrs. Pearson is going to speak. I won't excuse you, George Pearson. Next time a friend and neighbor comes to see me, just say something when you see her. Good evening, or how do you do, or something, and just don't march in and sit down without a word. It's bad manners. जॉर्ज जब मिसेस फिट्जरॉल्ड को पॉइंट आउट करता है कि आप हमारे घर पे क्या कर रहे हो, वी आर ऑलरेडी फाइटिंग, यू कैन लीव. मिसेस पियर्सन जंप्स इन, उसकी जो वाइफ है जो चेंज हो चुकी है नाउ, शी सेज दैट आई विल नॉट एक्सक्यूज यू मिस्टर जॉर्ज पियर्सन. नेक्स्ट टाइम मेरा कोई फ्रेंड या नेबर आए तो यू शुड टॉक टू दैट पर्सन नाइसली, behave in a good way, wish that person, you know, just you are coming and sitting here without, this is bad manners, right? So nervously, no, it's all right. Mrs. Fitzgerald is nervous now. No, it's not all right. We all have some decent manners in this house. Fine. Or I'll know the reason why. Well, George कहता है, well, what? Why don't you get off to your club? Special night tonight, isn't it? They will be waiting for you, waiting to have a good laugh. Go. Go on then. Don't disappoint them. See, so Mrs. Pearson is going to next level to insult her husband, George. वो कहती है तुम यहाँ पे क्या कर रहे हो? You are sitting at home today. Go to the club. People are waiting to crack jokes on you. You know, people are going. People are waiting there at club. You are going to have your super special dinner over there, and people are going to have super special taunts on you. You know, they will be calling you Pompey. Go. Why you're wasting your time here? Now it's a sheer insult, and George says, "Make me look silly in front of her now." Go on, don't mind me. Sixes and sevens. Poor Doris been crying her eyes out, getting the neighbors in to see the fun. Suddenly losing his temper, glaring at Mrs. Pearson and shouting, all right, let her hear it. What's the matter with you? Have you gone barmy or what? कहता अच्छा अब तूने neighbors के सामने you have to, you know, show this drama and all. So in front of the neighbors you're going to do this. Suddenly losing his temper, glaring at Mrs. Pearson and shouting, all right, let her hear it. So इसके सामने कहता मैं पूछता हूँ, have you been crazy now? Why you are doing this? Why my daughter is crying? Why you misbehaving with all of us? If you shout at me again like that, George Pearson, I will slap your big fat silly face. See the sheer insult of her husband. She says, if you're going to talk like that, I'm going to slap your face. नहीं बोला, big fat silly face. So she's calling names her husband. She's you know, using such words for her husband in front of her neighbor. That was quite, you can say, unbearable for George. Oh no, no, please, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Pearson sits, staring at her bewildered. Either I am off my chump or you two are. पता क्या होता है? Actually, Mrs. Pearson, जो अब Mrs. Fitzgerald हैं, she is having the personality of Mrs. Pearson. तो वो उसकी जो wife है Mrs. Pearson उससे fight कर रही है. तो she starts addressing her Mrs. Fitzgerald, Mrs. Fitzgerald. तो अब George को तो नहीं पता है that she is actually the personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald and that's why she is behaving like this. Fine. तो उसको लगता है कि my wife is also has gone mad. She is, you know, doing this and now this Mrs. Fitzgerald, हमारी जो neighbor है, वो अपने name से ही मेरी wife को क्यों address कर रही है? Why she is calling my wife as Mrs. Fitzgerald? That's why he says this. Either I am off my chump or you two are. Means either I am mad, either or you people are mad. How do you mean? No, no, please, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Look, you are Mrs. Fitzgerald. So why are you telling yourself to stop when you are not doing anything? So he's saying, तो अपना ही नाम क्यों ले रही है? You are Mrs. Fitzgerald. Why are you calling my wife as Mrs. Fitzgerald? Tell her to stop. Then there will be some sense in it. Staring at Mrs. Pearson, I think you must be tiddly. So he's saying that you must be like, you know, all these words, barmy and crazy and tiddly and out of your wits, and it means that somebody out of the mind, right? Say that again, George Pearson. Immediated. All right, all right, all right. So ये conversation चल रही है. ऊपर से Doris enters left, slowly looking miserable. She's still wearing the wrap. Mrs. Pearson sits on the settee. Mrs. Fitzgerald, hello Doris dear, miserably. Hello Mrs. Fitzgerald. I thought you were going out with Charlie Spence tonight. What's that to do with you? आगे से डोरिस कहती, what you have to do with where I'm going, Mrs. Fitzgerald? आप क्यों पूछ रहे हो? Stop that, Mrs. Pearson says. No, it's all right. It's not all right. I won't have a daughter of mine talking to anybody like that. Now answer Mrs. Fitzgerald properly, Doris, or go upstairs again. Doris looks wonderingly at her father. डॉरिस को लगता है कि अब मिसेस फिट्जरॉल्ड के सामने भी मेरे को इंसल्ट करने लगी है. माय मदर इज डूइंग दैट ओनली. इन despair, don't look at me, I give it up, I just give it up. Well, answer her. I was going out with Charlie Spence tonight, but now I have called it off. What a pity, dear. Why have you? Because if you must know, my mother's been going on at me, making me feel miserable and saying he's got buck teeth and is half-witted. Oh, you should not have said this. So वो मिसेस फिट्जरॉल्ड को बताती है कि I was going to go about and with my friend and my mother, she calls my you can say friend Charlie Spence as half you can say bucket teeth and half-witted boy and all. She insulted me and she did not iron my clothes also and all. That's why I have cancelled my plan of going out. और मिसेस फिट्जरॉल्ड आगे से कह रही है, you should not have done this. Mrs. Pearson, Mrs. Fitzgerald, I'll manage my family, you manage yours. Ticking her off now. Are you any? They are waiting for you at the club, George. Don't forget. And don't you start crying again, Doris. That's enough. Quite enough. Mrs. Fitzgerald stands up and she says, George and Doris stare at her bewildered. उनको समझ में ही नहीं आ रहा है क्या हो रहा है. What is the scene going on? So both are so confused. Now listen, you two. I want to have a private little talk with Mrs. Fitz. She corrects herself hastily with Mrs. Pearson. So I will be obliged if you will leave us alone for a few minutes. I will let you know when we have finished. Go on, please. I promise you that you won't regret it. There is something here that only I can deal with. I'm glad somebody can, cause I can't. Come on, Doris. So Mrs. Fitzgerald, जो वहाँ पे अब submissive बन चुकी हैं, she asked George and Doris to leave the room because she thought this is the time we should, again exchange personalities or talk about this separately. That's why he's requesting George and Doris to leave the place. क्योंकि ज़्यादा बात बढ़ चुकी थी. Mrs. Pearson has talked so much badly to both of them, to all three of them. George and Doris, they exit left. As they go, Mrs. Fitzgerald moves to left of the small table and sits. She eagerly beckons Mrs. Pearson to do the same thing. तो वो दोनों again सामने बैठते हैं एक दूसरे के and Mrs. Fitzgerald कहती है, Mrs. Fitzgerald, we must change back now. We really must. ठीक है, तो वो उसको Mrs. Fitzgerald ही बुलाएगी ना, क्योंकि उसकी ही पर्सनालिटी, बॉडी की पर्सनालिटी उसके अंदर गई हुई है. वो कहती है we must change. और अब Mrs. Pearson जो रियल Mrs. Pearson है, वो बोल्ड हो चुकी है and confident हो चुकी है. वो कहती why? Because this has gone too far. ठीक है, अब जो रियल मिसेस फिट्जरॉल्ड है कैरिंग द पर्सनालिटी ऑफ मिसेस पियर्सन, शी सेज कि बहुत ज्यादा हो रहा है अभी. आई कांट बेयर इट. अ बिट मोर ऑफ द सेम वुड डू देम गुड, मेकिंग अ ग्रेट डिफरेंस ऑलरेडी. सो मिसेस पियर्सन कहती कोई बात नहीं, लेट इट बी नाउ. नो, आई कांट स्टैंड एनी मोर, आई रियली कांट, वी मस्ट चेंज बैक, हरी अप प्लीज मिसेस फिट्जरॉल्ड. So well, if you insist. So both of them now they are going to exchange personalities. She stretches her hands across the table eagerly. Mrs. Pearson takes them. Quiet now, relax. Mrs. Pearson and Mrs. Fitzgerald stare at each other, muttering exactly as before, Ashtadam, Ashtadam, Ashtalamona. They carry out the same action as before, going lax. They become like statues, then again coming back to life, but this time, of course, they become their proper personality. So, itna kuch hone ke baad, now they have come into their real personas. Mrs. Pearson again becomes very polite and good. Mrs. Fitzgerald again becomes very loud and bossy. Oh, well, I enjoyed that. Mrs. Pearson, I didn't. Well, you ought to have done. Now listen. Mrs. Fitzgerald उसको advice देने लगी है. Mrs. Pearson, don't go soft on them again, else it will have all been wasted. अब बहुत ज़्यादा soft मत हो जाना. It will be a waste then of your efforts. Okay, I will try not to, Mrs. Fitzgerald. They have not had as long as I would like to have given them. Another hour or two is rough treatment might have made it certain. I'm sure they will do better now, though I don't know I'm going to explain. So Mrs. Pearson को लगता है क्या करूँगी मैं, कैसे explain करूँगी, why did I do this and all. Don't you start any explaining or apologizing. Mrs. Fitzgerald कहती जो भी किया सब waste हो जाएगा. Do not explain anything to anyone. Do not apologize. It's all right for you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. After all, they are not your husband and children. Fine, Mrs. Pearson says. Mrs. Fitzgerald, now you listen to me. You admitted yourself you were spoiling them. And they did not appreciate you. Any apologies, any explanations, and you will be straight back where you were. I'm warning you, dear, just give them a look, a tone of voice now and again to suggest you might be tough with them if you wanted to be, and it ought to work anyhow, we can test it. So Mrs. Fitzgerald उसको advice देती है कि अब दोबारा से वैसी मत बन जाना, डरी हुई, submissive, giving explanations, doing work. You just remain the same जैसे अभी behave किया था. It will be very helpful for you. Mrs. Pearson, how? Well, what is it you would like them to do that they don't do? Stop at home for once. Yes, give me a hand with supper. Anything you would like them to do that you enjoy whether they do or not. Well, yes, I like a nice game of rummy, but of course I hardly ever have one except at Christmas. So वो कहती Mrs. Pearson, जो आपको पसंद है वो भी करो. Don't look for the happiness of others. What do you like? She says, I love to play cards. Rummy is a game, beta, game of cards. Fine. तो वो कहती है I love to play rummy. Mrs. Fitzgerald, that will do then. Fine. But remember, keep firm or you have had it. You can come in now. वो उनको बुला लेती है जॉर्ज डोरिस सिरिल के बाप आ सकते हो अंदर हमारी बातें हो गई है. They enter looking apprehensively कोई उनको है कि what's going on in a fishy way. Something is there. I'm just off to let you enjoy yourself. So Mrs. Fitzgerald चले जाती है. Now who's left? Only Pearson family is left. Family look anxiously at Mrs. Pearson, who smiles, much relieved. They smile back at her. And now when she's smiling, everybody's smiling at her. Doris, yes, mother. Mrs. Pearson, seeing that you don't want to go out, I tell you what I thought we will do. Remember, no objections, I hope. George, no, mother, whatever you say. I thought we would have a nice family game of rummy and then you children could get the supper ready while I have a talk with your father. So this is what was suggested by Mrs. Pearson कि चलिए अब ऐसे करते कोई जा तो रहा नहीं है बाहर. We will play a game of rummy, game of cards. Then you children will prepare dinner and then I will sit with my husband by the time. So this is what she decides that weekend. George कहता suits me. Okay, what about you two? कहता मेरे लिए तो ठीक है. What about you two? Cyril says hastily, yes, okay, fine. Doris hesitatingly, what? Speak up. I think it would be lovely. Goodbye, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Come again soon. Mrs. Fitzgerald, yes, dear. Good night. Have a nice time. Mrs. Fitzgerald exits left and the family cluster round mother as the curtain falls. Family cluster around mother means सारे group बना के अपनी mother के पास खड़े हो जाते हैं and they agreed to what mother suggested. See, we have read this chapter, but what we have learned is, we will do question answers, wait. Yes, all the students, is it clear to you all that how chapter ended? So please listen. So what is required? Your mothers are not asking you for the costly gifts. They are not asking you to spend the whole day with them. It can be a small game, a board game. It can be whatever your mother likes. Every mother is different. Every person is different. You just find out what are the interests. After becoming mothers, they give their whole life to their children for raising them, for fulfilling their wishes, for raising them and fulfilling their dreams. And in that race, they forget their own dreams and wishes. Yes, it's true. In 95% cases, it is true. Most of the mothers, they stop, considering their own wishes. Ki mujhe bhi kuch chahiye. They stop considering themselves as priority. So what is required? We need to spend some quality time with our mothers. Whatever they like, we should see as a, you can say, young girl, what she would do. If she's good at singing, you sing with her. If she's good at dancing, you dance with her. If she's good at painting, ask her to paint something out of the fixed schedule. If she loves to go out with her. If she loves to, you can say, read, gift her a book. So this is your gestures towards your mothers. Okay, it's not that you have to do something great or in that way. It just there is need of some small efforts to make your mother feel valuable in the family, and she's being valued, she's being loved and respected, and you are thankful towards her. That's enough for her. She's not demanding anything else from you. Okay, so this is what we have learned from this chapter, Mother's Day, that how important mothers are. Fine. Abraham Lincoln ka quote hai that whatever I am or I owe to be, fine, whatever I am or I shall be, I owe to my darling mothers. तो ये एक quote है अब्राहम लिंकन का कि जो भी मैं हूँ, whatever I am or whatever I will be or I shall be in future, I just owe to my mother. You know, if you become something in life, there are some people who are your backbones. They will never confront. They are your parents. They can be whosoever family members are helping you in doing your small things also. Not ki hamesha, it's not about money always, it's about many things, many little things. They're offering you their time, their value, dropping you to the school, coming back, means any action of theirs. It's just your help only. So you are being raised by your parents economically, socially, emotionally, fine. So one should be thankful towards them. Okay, so now it's your turn to participate. Let's do the question answers and unmute yourself. This play, written in the 1950s, is a humorous and satirical depiction of the status of the mother in the family. What are the issues it raises? Do you think it caricatures these issues, or do you think that problems it raises are genuine? How does the play resolve the issues? Abhi beta 5 minutes reh gaye hain, but we can discuss one or two questions. But we have repeated period today. That is 6th period. In that period, we will do question answers of Mother's Day in detail. Fine. Iske ilawa bhi extra questions bhi or these ones. So do join in the 6th period also. Do not think that ki aaj English ka ek hi period hai. Only on Fridays you have repeated period. Okay. So this play is written in, what are the issues it raises? हाँ जी बताइए जल्दी से. Yes, Khyati, what are the issues it raises?
It basically tells us about the role of a mother and how they are being, how we are treating them insignificantly in household.
Fine. So we will discuss bell ho chuki hai. We will discuss these question answers in next period. Okay, beta. So please revise these questions. Sabki turn aani hai. So you will be participating. You will be giving answers in the next period. Okay. Have a nice day.